Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Welcome to the Islamic Advice podcast. I'm your host, Majid, and today I'm joined by a special guest, a very special guest, shall I say, joining us from Montreal, Canada, brother Abdul Ahad. Brother, assalamu alaikum and welcome to the show.
Walaikum salam. It's an honor to be in this show.
MashaAllah, mashallah. I mean, we've kind of been in touch for a couple of years now, really, just via Instagram and stuff like that. Really, never really got to chat to you as such. But Alhamdulillah, when the opportunity came to record a podcast with you, just a brotherly chat between two brothers from different parts of the world, shall I say? It's an opportunity I had to take. But bro, as it's the first time you're on the show. Inshallah, there will be many more times. But as the first time, do you want to just tell us a bit about yourself for the listeners, those listening, watching? Who is brother Abdul Ahad?
Yeah, of course. Bismillah. So yeah, alhamdulillah, I'm studying political science at Concordia University, finishing my degree there. I have quite a few interests: history, philosophy, the history of science in particularly. And one particular sort of thing in philosophy I like to study quite a bit, and I have taken a lot of courses in, is the sort of modern political philosophy. So what I do like to touch upon most of the time is studying liberalism, the history of it, the philosophy of it, as well as particular new ideologies. And one thing I like to sort of do by studying these particular aspects is trying to understand how does Islam posit a objective kind of form of either morality, either of and in any particular endeavor, how does Islam sort of transcend these particular ideologies? So this is like kind of the broad sort of research that I do. I do study, of course, other particular things in political science, in comparative politics. I study nationalism quite a bit. I'm actually doing a few essays on nationalism currently.
MashaAllah.
And yeah, alhamdulillah, a bit about, I guess, my sort of personal life. I'm very active with the masjids here in Montreal. Here it's bilingual, so we have, of course, English and French. I'm fluent in both. And it's really nice to sort of see the two sort of Muslim communities who speak English and French sort of work together in so many different initiatives, be it from charity, be it by having particular initiatives of da'wah here, mashallah, in Montreal. So that's just a bit about me.
All that good stuff, bro. So, in regards to living in Canada, I mean, were you born there? Did you move there when you was a youngster, or what's your background in that respect?
I'm a first generation in Canada. I'm born and raised here in Montreal. My parents they're both from Pakistan. My mother actually came here in the 70s when she was young. My father came here in the 90s. And subhanAllah, it's one thing growing up is that in Montreal specifically, especially like at the time when I was born, there was slowly a growing rise of Muslims coming into Montreal at a vast sort of rate. And one particular thing that was occurring was the normalization of so many different masajids being made in different neighborhoods. Before, if you go back to from the 50s to I guess the 70s, because the 80s was more of the rise of where Islam started to pick up the pace in Montreal. It was literally just like two masajids. It was such like the Muslims were in such an inferior complex where they actually sometimes used to pray a so-called Kadda Juma on Sunday, which makes no particular sense, but this was the case. But alhamdulillah, after some time, after some efforts of the dawah of spreading the word, connecting with the Muslimin in this particular city, there was quite a bit of religiosity that was developed and preserved, not only from outside but also developed in here too. Like subhanAllah, now Islam is so vibrant in Montreal. We have so many different communities. I have so many different revert friends, subhanAllah, from all parts of the world. Alhamdulillah. Yeah.
No,
one of my closest friends, actually, he's this Latino brother, mashallah. He reverted. And I have a friend who he comes from like a Chinese atheist background, and alhamdulillah, he reverted, subhanAllah. So it's really beautiful to sort of see that intrinsic kind of development of interconnectedness as Muslimin.
Yeah, of course, bro.
Yeah.
Of course, the truth, the haqq, can only be hidden, or attempt to hide anyway for a certain amount of time. Eventually, people will come across the truth, and then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala opens their heart. But something you mentioned, we'll in regards to the academic stuff, as we sort of discussed offline, one of the topics we do want to discuss today is the fact of the sort of challenges that Muslims have in Western academia, because some of the the areas you talked about, philosophy, liberalism, and so on, right? So we're going to come to that, but before that, you mentioned that you also study history. Okay.
Mhm.
I want to kind of I think it's worth getting your views on a historical event which occurred on 3rd of March 1924, using the Gregorian calendar. And obviously that's yesterday, right? Now, this
Yep.
is an event, it's a date where, to be honest with you, I think Muslims in minority are kind of aware of it. And that in itself is, a bit upsetting due to the sort of like importance of the event. So as we know, in on 3rd of March 1924, the Ottoman Khilafah as an institution was abolished in Istanbul by Mustafa Kemal, the traitor, may I add. So at the end of the day, it's a massive event, and I'm sure, it'd be good to get your thoughts on it as well. So, what are your thoughts from a historical point of view, and obviously as a Muslim as well? You said you study history as well. So what are your thoughts, man, in regards to this event?
Of course, there is. It's probably one of the greatest upsets of the sort of modern era as Muslims. When at least to some degree, a symbolic leadership at this point, it was quite symbolic, was just completely disregarded. And, uh, you know, of course, there was quite a bit of resistance towards that I guess, move. Yeah, right after there was the sort of like complete official de jure like removal of the caliph position in Istanbul. There were a few Kurdish tribes, actually, the Sunni Kurdish tribes, the Zaza tribes, who actually allied themselves with the remnants of the Hamidiyya, which were basically during Abdul Hamid II, rahimahullah, his sort of army, his personal army. They actually were fighting against the sort of Ataturk, the Republican forces. But of
Just
course, it
just to add, brother Ahad, Abdul Ahad, that just to throw in there that from what I
yeah,
read years ago, you know what you're talking about, this Kurdish uprising. Well, you
yeah,
can't say it's Kurdish uprising, but they were Kurds against this.
yeah,
That even the modern day, like PKK and all these secular
yeah,
groups, the actual origins of this conflict between the Turkish state and the
yeah.
Kurds in that
Was
region
villages.
began from here. So I don't know how
Yeah,
much truth there is to that, but that's what I read a long time ago.
yeah, of course, yeah, of course. Like, there's a lot of ideas, like for example, that the Kurds are quite secular, but the reality is that like, there's it's a heterogeneous ethnicity. You do have more religious Kurds even today, and more secular ones as well. So there was sort of that kind of development. I know in South Asia there is a Khilafat movement, the sort of social demonstration kind of sort of act in order to try to like bring out awareness of that. Look, we need our Khilafah back. So, subhanAllah, in terms of the history, though, like this history wise, like, I'm gonna make a sort of heuristic distinction between like my own sentiments and the sort of history wise. Of course, it was bound to happen. Turkey was secularizing not only in the political institutions, but in many parts of urban civil society. Secularization was happening, and in most uh, post-colonial states and most liberalized sort of states of the 20th century, you do see the sort of monopoly of power and force being upheld by the sort of political elites who were trained by the colonizers. So of course you're going to see people with like French ideas of liberalism and individualism sort of have some degree of agency in Turkey through the republicanism, being loyal to a republic. It was bound to happen. It could be even argued that the last particular I guess actual power of the Khilafah was under Sultan Abdul Hamid II. Then afterwards it became much more ceremonial. But nevertheless, it was definitely a devastating sort of atrocity that happened that hindered any sort of progress as Muslims in unification.
Yeah, no, 100% agree with you, bro. And if
Yeah.
I was watching a podcast, I was just watching a podcast yesterday, and on that, I think it's the Paul Williams podcast. I don't know if I think that's the right name, Paul Williams. But anyway, what they showed is in the podcast they showed like an excerpt of a news article from The Economist in 1924, and basically how they were actually rejoicing that the Western ideas have now prevailed in the East. So this was an event which was seen as like opening the gateways to exporting their views to the at that time. Maybe it was a certain elite within the Ummah, or within certainly the Turks, like the Young Turks and so on, who had embraced these ideas from the French. However, en masse people knew only Islam, but this was like what opened the doors that opened all this stuff in. And we see that straight away, the kind of changes that Ataturk made, because he knew that what we need to do is we need to disconnect the Muslims in Turkey from its Islamic past. So changing the language from the Turkish Arabic to the Latin, the adhan in Turkish, banning the fez, banning actually any clothes like like a thobe and stuff like that, which resemble something of the past. They linked this purely to backwardness, and actually what they said was, and this is the same thing what the Europeans were pushing, that is these ideas that kept us behind. And the West was showing that, look, that the moment we excelled was when we separated state from society, state from the church from life. Yeah, we separated church and state. So you need to do the same. So what they were pushing was the fact that anything resembled Islam was seen as backwards. But you're right in regards to as an event. We have to agree that at that moment in time, it was kind of more symbolic. However, even this symbolism, it wasn't easy for Ataturk to totally abolish it straight away. There were stages. He even had to try to promote that he was pro-Caliphate. If you see some of his speeches, but actually from his actions, it shows that what his real intentions were.
Yes, well, I remember reading an excerpt from a Turkish source, actually translated basically, of him even being offered to be the Khilafah. Like basically, during that sort of Turkish War of Independence, you had two particular governments: the government in Ankara, the Republican one that he was with, and then of course you had the Khilafah in Istanbul, which actually ironically was supported by the British, because the Khilafah at this time, it literally was just in decay. Turkey was divided, like cut into pieces, almost like Sykes-Picot, where basically the French had a piece, the Greeks had a piece, the Italians and the English had a piece of it. So the issue is that like at this point it was debating what kind of government, like how should the government be formulated, other than just this sort of the military apparatus of just trying to seek this sort of Turkish independence from the colonizers. What kind of government should be in place? And ironically, of course, they did seek independence, but they adopted the very colonizers' ideologies, which is quite ironic. So there is that sort of aspect of understanding Ataturk as not necessarily someone who maybe supported the Khilafah, but there's two views of him. Because I read a biography about him a while ago. There's the view of him being someone who is static, meaning that he was actually quite liberal from the start, but not liberal as in not conservative. Like he did have particular conservative values, and he was just quite secular. And then there's the view of him like sort of being transitionary, that he was supporting the Ottoman Khilafah, and then he decided to change after becoming the president and whatnot. So there is that sort of discussion as well. But nevertheless, in terms of actions, as you said, he did dismantle with his sort of his particular party and legislation. He did dismantle the Khilafah, which
bro, his actions though, the thing is the things he did after, they weren't small things. It was like
they weren't
switch overnight, like be pro-Islam and then be, because you got secularism, like just say like secularism. I mean, I'm not sure how it is in Canada, right? Just say so. Britain is a secular country, right? However, they have this element where someone would argue because they promote multiculturalism, it's a bit different to how it is France. France is a bit more hardcore, right?
Yeah.
So here you had the seat of the Khilafah go from the seat of Khilafah, not even to just moderate secularism, if you can call it that, to the most far right kind of secularism. That
Absolutely.
doesn't happen overnight.
Yeah.
Yeah,
that's absolutely, subhanAllah. And touching upon the idea of sort of multiculturalism, which you mentioned, how is it, like, of course, there's another topic, but how is it in Britain? Like, what is the sort of project of the government in terms of multiculturalism?
It is a bit of a different topic. However, let's go into that. Let's go into that because it's kind of linked anyway, to be honest with you. What the discussion that's been happening in UK for just say since 9/11 and certainly since 7/7, if when these the attacks happen on the trains, basically people are saying multiculturalism is dead. Multiculturalism failed because what they're saying is that these immigrants came and they came with their distinct cultures and they stayed in their own areas and became like ghettos, right? And we kind of allowed it, right? As long as they were law-abiding and so on. What the question was afterwards saying, okay, you've got guys who were born in the UK, but they blew up some trains, right? So they were saying, actually, what we need more of a American type of model where you have these, you have all these people come in. However, first and foremost, your identity is American, right? Your primary identity is American. So you know how since they're young, they have to, like, I don't know if it happens in Canada, but they raise the flag in the room and in the classroom, and they might sing the anthem. What it does is it kind of like gives you this identity of being American first. So since that time, what the push is now is kind of like they've redefined what is British. So basically, British maybe in the past meant you had a passport, or you came there, you became a citizen, or you were born there. But now British said, actually, what British meant was you have to believe in the values, the culture, to be British, right? So now what we have is there's schemes, there's projects that have been set up for years now, like the Prevent. I'm not sure if you know about Prevent. Is linked to, you might know about CVE, countering violent extremism. So all of these things in the past decade or so has been really has identified the Muslims with a magnifying glass and really is trying to change them to discard notions of ummah, notions of Islam having anything to do with your day-to-day life, as long as you keep it to yourself. But first and foremost, you are a British, you should believe in freedoms, you should believe in democracy, all these things. And even just to quickly answer your question, you might have heard about the big debate that's happening recently with, the citizenship being stripped. So recently, Shamima Begum, who's in Syria at the moment, basically her appeal failed. It was rejected. The fact that she can't come to the UK. However, there's people who are not just Muslim, like non-Muslims who are like, they believe in freedoms and stuff. What they're saying is actually what we have here is a two-tier system of citizenship, right? So if her name was Sharon or Susie, as an example, she would be brought back to Britain and she would be, tried and she would be punished, right? Yeah. But here is different because if your parent was from another country, even though you might never have been to that country, your citizenship can be revoked. So what they're basically saying is, in reality, immigrants are second-class citizens.
Literally, yeah.
So that's the situation within Britain for Muslims. However, one thing I would say though, if you ask the same question to someone who's probably more interested in career, in money, in making it, then he'll probably say to you, it's amazing. But I'm just giving you my personal opinion of what I see and what challenges Muslims generally feel. It would link to their deen. However, other people, if their mindset is for careers, then yeah, man, there's loads of opportunities, isn't there?
Yeah, absolutely. That distinction is quite valid. Here in Canada and Quebec, one aspect about the sort of idea of multiculturalism is usually when we think about Canada, we think about this nice sort of liberal hub where everybody comes together and holds hands in igloos, but the issue is that of course there's a sort of idea distinction between the American melting pots, which it seems like the UK has adopted, and what we call the Canadian mosaic. So basically, instead of being forced upon to sort of be like, for example, a naturalized citizen, they like to use this term naturalized, meaning that you've been assimilated. You come in with your particular religious or cultural baggage, and you sort of contribute to a Canadian mosaic. Here in Quebec, though, this is a bit different. Of course, in Canada, you have a federal system, meaning that provinces do have a degree of autonomy. So one particular thing here in Quebec is that you do have that sort of, I guess, you could sort of say this kind of tradition of arrogant French secularism.
Yeah.
We do have that particular sort of complex where the provincial and the federal kind of governments are always kind of in a bit sort of a degree of a conflict when it comes to immigration. When like for example, speaking the French language, it's people who don't come from particular francophonie, so places of sort of, I guess, French-speaking former colonies, or France itself, or Belgium itself. They have to literally learn French within a particular time frame in Quebec in order to be able to do particular things. And then, of course, you have the whole debate about wearing visible religious items in the public sector, or even
so in Quebec,
yeah,
Montreal,
yeah.
Is it just the fact that they speak French, or do they feel connected to actual France?
I feel like it's a bit of both, because of course here in Quebec you do have a particular history that developed. So since 1763, when the British took over Nouvelle France, when it was, and they made the province of Quebec, or Lower Canada it was called. What happens is that the French always felt like they were in an inferior complex by the British dominance. So after, there was at least 5 British acts in total that, like, during a few centuries, where basically 2 or 3 centuries, where basically you had this discussion about how should the French be part of this government. They're Catholics, they're not Protestants. They have particular views of the British, and there were particular ways to either suppress or appease them. So to some degree in history, there was a sort of inferior complex. But now today, of course, especially after 1867, when Canada sort of formulated as a country of 4 provinces at first, you had Quebec have this kind of debate between the Anglophones and the Francophones. So those of British descent and those of course, the French descent. And there was a lot of particular tensions between these 2 particular communities that are in itself quite heterogeneous. It's not just all British descended people. Some people, for example, they come from Ireland in the 1900s, but they're Catholic. So you do have particular interesting complexes of that. But of course, in terms of today, the issue is that Quebec, the provincial government that we currently have is trying to make a cultural sort of secular fundamentalism where basically they want to impose their secular values and they see citizenship tied into um, not only, for example, you standing up for an anthem, but literally in you not wearing particular religious uh, gear, be it the cross, be it the hijab, be it the niqab, be it the kippah, be it the turban for the Sikhs. They don't want people to wear that in the public sector, as well as even private businesses who just refuse to do so. And this particular sort of fragment of secular fundamentalism kind of comes from the French tradition of secularism, as you mentioned. But nevertheless, there is a particular identity that was developed here of so-called, I guess, victimhood, that we were under the superior complex of the Anglophones, and now they're trying to sort of take over with their language. Like there's a particular narrative that sort of developed that's half true, half false. So with that particular narrative, we sort of see how a lot of the times we see people use victims of narratives of victimhood in order to facilitate their particular agenda, which even if it's oppressive.
Yeah. I mean, don't want to delve into it, but you'd believe that the Hindutva right now are the victims, but that's for another time. But just I do want to speak about life in the academia with what you're doing, because I think that's linked to even the societal aspects as well. However, what I want to do though is linked to the last topic of the Ottoman state and 3rd of March. I just want to sort of sort of send a message out really, to people listening and stuff like this, that it is a travesty that not many, not a lot of Muslims are aware of this or give it that importance. And if you look at the hadiths, whether it's to do with the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam describing the Imam as a shield, or whether it's the hadith where the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he talked about the knots of Islam will be undone one by one. The first will be ruling, and the last will be the salah. And I think the reality is that some people may argue, well, okay, yeah, it gets tired hearing the same thing every year on 3rd of March. But I think what's important, and this is a responsibility for Muslims, generally, we need to be working towards its return. However, the least we can do is just generate some awareness, just speak to our kids, just so that people know. And this is where sometimes I feel, I don't know how it is where you are, Brother Abdul Ahad, but I feel let down sometimes by the masjids, because it's just, no one's saying like it's going to happen tomorrow. No one's saying it's coming back tomorrow. However, we always talk about, well, you need to, dua is the biggest weapon. You hear all the people say dua is the biggest weapon. So how come we're not even making dua, right? If that's your starting point, then certainly if you're making dua, the people know. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that they plot and the enemies plot and they plan, but Allah is the best of planners. We see how, for example, when this ISIS scenario came on the scene, I personally believe that the discussion was supposed to be from the Muslims, oh my gosh, if this is Khilafah, we don't want anything to do with this is 7th century. But even those guys who are, even the Imams who would never even speak about Khilafah, they came out and said, nah, this is not Khilafah. This is what Khilafah is, right? So it had a different effect. But I just feel sometimes like, whether it's on the 27th night in Ramadan or generally, if you don't speak about it in the congregation, right? Or at least make dua for it, so that it's in the mind of the people there, then it's going to be totally lost. And I think that's something which every Muslim, normal person, whatever the capacity is, I think we can do that. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, absolutely. It's, alhamdulillah, like here in Montreal, you have sort of, I want to like say this like just heuristically, meaning that it just as a tool, it's not like a particular absolute. You have two sort of sets of, I guess, models of masajid. You have some particular masajid that are extremely active in the sense of the dawah, in spreading the deen, as well as being aware, also from not only just like the domestic politics, but dealing with these particular subjects. I remember during, I think it was last Ramadan, where basically during the khutbah, alhamdulillah, it was a beautiful khutbah about the importance of having a khilafah, and how detrimental the ummah has become because of the absence of this institution that is so important and embedded. And it's something that's quite obligatory as a Muslim to have. And you do have these sort of particular people like rooting out for that, and then you do have those particular people, those particular measures where they're quiet about it. They sort of enjoy the fruits of their inferior complex. Where, okay, alhamdulillah, like the government gives us some money, we're going to invest in our masjid, and the sort of aesthetic of it, and then they might do particular events, for that sort of deal with more the internal assessment. It's good to deal with these particular issues of dealing with the heart and spirituality, but the reality is that our deen is not a selfish deen that we keep in our hearts. If that was the case, we'd probably be like, I believe you're from a South Asian background, right?
Yeah, we're Pakistan, bro. Pakistan.
Yeah,
Kashmir,
exactly.
Pakistan.
Oh, mashallah. But my parents from Punjab. But subhanAllah, we'd probably be either Hindus or Majus, like honestly. If people,
Bro, I just want the listeners and people watching
yeah,
really to appreciate that point what you said there.
yeah,
I think is a key point. The fact that if Islam if Islam didn't have a mission to take Islam to the rest of mankind, and if it was purely inward looking, then you're right, we'd probably be idol worshippers, Hindus,
yeah,
or Majusi, fire worshippers.
exactly. SubhanAllah. We would probably resemble more like the Jewish communities, because they don't actually advocate for the spread of their religion. They really have an ethnic tie to their religion. So being born into it, and even if you want to convert, it takes like a year or two to actually convert it, subhanAllah. So the issue is that like Islam, of course, is extremely altruistic to the extent where it is not excluded for anybody. Everybody could become a Muslim, and it's very simple to become a Muslim. And in terms of the practicality of that, we have to realize that because it's so easy, we should be inviting people constantly, having a particular fikr for people, from our neighbors to our co-workers, to so many different fragments of society that we deal with. We shouldn't be shy of the religion. Once we become shy, we become in an inferior complex. And sometimes from that inferior complex, where you're dealing with particular, I guess, the superior complex of liberal hegemony or secular hegemony, you tend to start to even develop throughout particular years a sort of Stockholm syndrome, where you're imprisoned and you kind of start to adopt and assimilate towards those ideologies of liberalism, secularism, and particularly modern sort of context of the individual. When we look at particular people, for example, discuss, like for example, discussing the Sharia is quite a taboo subject. Like I remember I had a one political science class, and the teacher just said, "Raise your hand if you're a feminist," and I was the only one who did not raise up my hand, and everybody was looking at me in the most dirtiest face.
So
And
were you the only Muslim in the class though?
I actually wasn't.
Oh,
Yes.
okay.
Yeah, I wasn't. There was quite a few, even there was a few brothers there. There was a few sisters there, and the thing is that, like, there was sort of discussion of why and why not, and of course, it sort of becomes synonymous that feminism and women's rights are like both together. And then, of course, if you sort of dissect that, Islam objectively grants women much better rights than the sort of, I guess, the dogma of feminism. But nevertheless, going back to the topic, in terms of the sort of aspect of khilafah and being vocal about it, it's something so important to be vocal about, because as you mentioned, the hadith, where basically, during the ends of times, you'll basically see the decay, like the removal of the ruling, the khilafah, and then the last one, the last knot was the rope
Salah.
was Salah. And
Salah.
subhanAllah, it's quite sad, but it's very vibrant in many communities where you have Muslimin. They might even be conservatives. They know that they have to pray, but they're not praying, and that's quite scary, because subhanAllah, I know some brothers who are, for example, they are not in the best sort of, I guess, sense of deen. Sometimes they're involved in illicit sort of activities, but alhamdulillah, they're at least praying. It's the basic. Even if you're like the worst of criminals, at least subhanAllah, pray.
You know
It's
what
the
it is?
last.
Sometimes you hear it quite a bit, bro, where people are like, well, if I'm doing all these things, then what's the point of
Yeah,
praying? But
yeah,
again, again, well, just because you do something wrong doesn't mean you shouldn't do what's right.
hmm
You know what I mean?
absolutely.
But bro, you know what? Just I want to I'll kind of move on from
Yeah, of
the
course.
the 1924 of topic. I think your point is the key point. The fact that as Muslims, we need to be aware of this. We need to know our history, because we can see many mistakes were made by the previous caliphates and so on. So these are things which we need to learn. We need to move forward in regards to this, and I think that's the important point. Now, you were kind of like you mentioned it in regards to like this feminism thing where they asked the question about who supports feminists or who is anti-feminist and so on. So I know that you're doing all these topics like philosophy and liberalism and all these type of topics, right? So what are the challenges, bro? So
Yeah.
you've gone into these things. Obviously, you have a desire to learn this stuff. Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
Is that desire from a career point of view? Is that desire from a dini point of view of trying to understand these ideas in order to
Mhm.
refute them and make sure Muslims don't fall into that trap? And also, like, what are the challenges that other Muslims are experiencing? Like you said, like in that classroom scenario, maybe some of
Yeah.
the Muslims didn't actually accept feminism, but they felt
Mhm.
the public opinion was so like difficult to put your hand up. You know what I mean? So yeah, go for it, bro.
Yeah, of course. So now we're like, I guess, touching more upon the sort of academia kind of content of, in terms of the topic. Firstly, one particular thing is that we have to understand sort of the whole idea of Western academic discipline. One particular idea of it is that, firstly, it's seen as objective, and cannot be questioned in terms of its methodology, but it could be questioned of its content. And what I mean by that is basically, when you're dealing with any sort of social science, when you're dealing with history, um, as long as there's particular interconnected literature or empirical evidence, um, in terms of the methods in itself, they're not really questioned as much as the content in itself. So, for example, dealing like there was a lot of like I took a few Islamic studies classes, and of course I do want to distinguish Islamic studies and studying the traditional
Sorry,
Islamic
was that in uni or was that like in a
in uni.
madrasa? In uni.
No, not in madrasa. Yeah, I'm actually making that distinction. Islamic studies in uni is, of course, completely different to actually studying the deen in a madrasa, under an alim or even.
So sorry, who's the teacher in the uni? Is he a Muslim or non-Muslim?
No, he was a non-Muslim. He was a non-Muslim. Uh, I remember I think it was named Professor James Foley. I forgot his name, but nevertheless, basically the thing is that his first kind of take was that, you know he understood like Islam as a man-made tradition. It didn't look into sort of, I guess, like actually questioning the religion, whether it's true or not, but they just take it for granted that it's a product of men making a tradition. So, and there's also a sort of, I guess, the only objective reality is that everything is subjective for the particular Western academic. Oh, it's just a matter of their particular sort of cultural context. They'll sort of deduce these particular things. They'll try to proclaim that, instead of looking into depth of, for example, why, for example, there's sectarian kind of conflicts within Islam, they'll just sort of deduce that, oh, it's natural for particular religions to divide and fight against one another for political reasons. Like they'll make these particular deductions that are quite redundant instead of actually importing analytical sort of insight. And the issue is that I really find that Western academics has just simply become agnostic. And the reason why I say it's become agnostic, it's not become, it is agnostic.
It is.
It is agnostic. Yeah, it is agnostic because if you are certain of uncertainty and you pride yourself by uncertainty and trying to proclaim a particular sort of case of being humble that, oh, I do not know. Of course, there is a particular appeal to that from, I think Socrates kept on saying that I know I do not know. And then in terms of the context of fiqh, even, I think it was Imam Malik who, rahimahullah, he said like la adri, but he was talking particularly in the matter of fiqh. There's a particular appeal of humility towards that. But the reality is that when you're dealing with the context of Western academics, the thing is that the fact that you can say we can never know because you are you sort of I guess appeal to scientism, for example, that you think that only you could get data or information through empirical analysis is quite problematic, because in epistemology, the theory of knowledge, how do we know? You have multiple sort of means to gain knowledge, not just empiricism, and even looking at empiricism's flaws as well. It's a huge discussion to be made about sort of studying how Western academics developed its particular methodologies. So that's one particular thing that I found quite interesting in terms of what made me sort of study these particular aspects. I wanted to understand why is it that people like Muslims, for example, here in Canada, okay, when they are praised for something in the past history, like non-Muslims will talk about Islamic golden age, they will accept that sort of condescending behavior by the Western academic who's like, oh, you Muslims, you developed math, whatever, something like that. And why is it that the Muslim feels like this is their sort of, I guess, primordial goal to be accepted, to sort of feel that it's like their inferior complex is kind of a goal. And the reality is that it's actually quite sad that there's this particular sort of behavior. So me, I actually just like, I study this not because of career, I actually study this just because I want to understand these particular complex in order to at least combat it and counter it.
Subhanallah.
Yes, it's so important. Actually, quite a few times, the two particular imams that I discuss most of the time, they grew up here. Uh, One of them actually was, subhanallah, from what I've heard, like he was involved in like as a teen, with particular sort of being on the street, knives, etc. You could understand this
Gangster lifestyle, yeah.
Yes, funnel, and yeah, exactly. And then, alhamdulillah, like early on, he was introduced to the deen quite thoroughly, and alhamdulillah, he's just this gem in our community. And the thing is that they understood the particular dynamics that we're dealing with as Muslimin here, being in a sort of inferior complex, and how do we sort of counter that? How do we make the dawah vibrant so that, subhanAllah, we can make this a center of Muslims? I sincerely believe that as Muslims, our goal in whatever city we are in is to make it centers of dawah, so that people not only learn about Islam, but they embrace the particular religion. They question the sort of Western hegemony, the ideologies. Me, one particular thing I study quite a bit is the sort of the advent of individualism. And one particularly interesting
But
thing that
just a point on what you said, Brother Abdul Ahad, that which I think can be an issue in regards to what you're saying about being an example for people in the West. Now, the thing is, obviously, as Muslims, we got to carry ourselves at all times, no matter where we are, in a certain way, yeah. Which is to benefit people, it's benefit mankind, because we carry the truth. The only issue is that I think at the moment there is a discussion, certainly within Muslims who are immigrants, not like people who have embraced Islam but natives to that land.
Yeah.
Where there's a sense of confusion based on identity. Like here in the UK, for example, there's a big emphasis on, are you British or are you Muslim? Because from their point of view, if you say I'm a Muslim from Britain, that's not the right answer. You have to be a British Muslim, which means first and foremost your identity is British. So there's this confusion where, when we go back home, we're kind of seen as foreigners. When we're here, we're called Paki or like as a derogatory term for Pakistanis and so on, right? So the issue of the dawah is actually kind of linked to the topic we were speaking about before about Islam and its implementation, because if you look at how Islam spread, and in certain lands or Arab lands and today, where it actually took generations for people to become Muslim. So no one was forced, but however, what they could do is they could witness what Islam was, not just read a book. And today the problem is that you might speak to 10 people that, alhamdulillah, one of them is guided because their heart, they're sincere, but the other 9, they might say, oh, you're not Abdul Ahad, brother. Yeah, well, they won't call you brother at this stage, but they say, you know what, he's a decent guy. But they go home, they put on the TV, whether it's Fox News, I don't know if you have Fox News in Canada, yeah? But
it's more in the US.
It's more in the US. So what they'll see is they'll see an image of Islam, which isn't true, but it's what's brainwashing people. So I feel like we can do what we have to do. Certainly, if you're in the West, your deen must be your priority, in the sense like to take the deen to people. The only problem is, I think that until we have a real example of what Islam is, that mankind can see firsthand, I think it's problematic on a large scale of bringing people to Islam. If you know what I'm trying to say, I'm not saying that you shouldn't do that. I'm just saying it's like I think maybe for the future, some may argue. I mean, these are the sort of questions I'm just throwing out. These are the sort of questions people are having, like, should we be here or should we be in the Muslim lands? These are the sort of debates that are going on, like here in the UK. I'll probably in Canada, but I just want to throw that in, bro. You carry on if you want to address that point. That's what, entirely up to you.
No, especially that last point about should we be here or should we not? This is there's so many layers to it, because if you, for example, you ask the context of someone who escaped Al-Andalus, for example, during the time of the Reconquista, I remember there were some particular primary sources of appeals to the rulers of Morocco that we cannot live among the disbelievers. Of course, there was a context of them oppressing them, and then there's the context of I think majority of people's context, it's not necessarily escaping injustices. For example, even if it's happening in a Muslim majority country, but I think the most of the context is that, like, sometimes this is all we've known. Like Canada, Montreal, Canada. It says I've known more Canada than Pakistan, for example.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, so that's definitely an interesting question. But the way I understand it is that, and of course this is not a ruling at all. Subhanallah. Rasul Sallallahu, when he started his dawah, he was in a complex where he was a minority in a particular society that the disbelief was vibrant, and he, of course, worked towards that within that society until, of course, the hijrah happened. When basically, they went to some went to Abyssinia, and then afterwards came back and then went to Medina. So the issue is that I believe that to be very stoic, you do what you can within the particular context that you are in. If some people, for example, they're here because maybe, for example, their families are not necessarily practicing, but they're practicing, and they want to be close to their families. It's more about those interpersonal kind of reasons of why they're being in a non-Muslim country. So
I think, bro, my question was more geared not from a Shari point of view, whether we should be or not, because the reality is like you gave the example of Al-Andalus, right?
Yeah.
You had Islam being established in Morocco, so the people that were now under the Christians, for them is like, well, we should go over the sea where Islam is. Right now, we don't have that reality. I was talking more in the sense like a lot of people are discussing it, looking at it from a future point of view. So certainly the way the trend is going, like people are worried that thinking maybe in 2-3 generations time, it's probably not it's not exaggerating the fact that maybe your offspring are in kufr.
Yes,
It was more in that respect, like on a personal choice, like people are questioning like whether we should go to the Muslim lands because they just seen one trajectory and it's moving in the wrong direction, right?
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
what I meant. That's what I meant.
Yeah. Yeah, okay. Now I understand better. I sincerely believe that, subhanAllah, like in terms of the trajectory, yeah, of course, assimilation is bound to happen in some degree or not. If we look at, I think Professor Steph Kedis, if you're familiar with him, the
No.
Greek brother, mashallah, who in Germany, amazing sort of history. He talks about the Tatars and the assimilation of the Tatars when they were escaping Mongol invasion, and they established themselves in Poland, Lithuania, Estonia. I believe in the 13th or 14th century, 13th century, I think. Basically, there were the Christian states were actually quite tolerant there, and they allowed the Muslims to have their masajid. But the reality is because of the sort of firstly not only just staying long, but because the dawah was a bit dry there and whatnot, you had assimilation to the extent where Finland, like a lot of people have Tatar ancestry, but they're purely Christian there. You're atheist there, and they have like even their names. They have nothing to do with the Tatar legacy, Tatar Muslim legacy.
Mm-hmm.
So of course it is bound to happen that after some generations, people become less religious. But I feel like in order to once again like to sort of counter that is just simply by understanding the importance of masajid. Of course, there's the aspect of reestablishing the khilafah, which I sincerely believe is wajib, to have. But the issue is that like what can we do right now? Firstly, as being involved in masajid, the dawah,
Bro, it's very important.
It's so important to at least touch the fabric of civil society, like of maybe you won't reach to a degree of for example political change, regime change in like 2-3 generations. Of course, a lot of it seems most unlikely, but at least you're able to touch civil society where basically, I'll give an example. There was a few brothers. They're actually involved in Tabligh Jamaat, and they went to a sort of an Aboriginal city that's up north of Montreal, much more further away, north of Quebec City even. And they started praying, and subhanAllah, everybody started watching them, and they were mostly métis, so like mixed, either mixed Aboriginal / European descent, or sometimes they're just people who adopted that particular Aboriginal lifestyle of living in a reserve, etc. So what happened is they started watching that, and subhanAllah, like I believe there was quite a few shahadas actually just by this particular initiative. So I believe that subhanAllah, if you're, to speak generically, Rasul Sallallahu he was someone who he sent his Sahaba to complete cities and tribes, and then to just one Sahaba to just completely give the dawah. And subhanAllah, once the leader sort of adopted the deen, like everybody else adopted the deen, and then they came back as Muslimin. So I sincerely believe in those particular initiatives and in this sort of aspect of civil society dealing with that. Is it sufficient? Of course not. We have to bring at least the awareness of the importance of the khilafah, but at least we could touch the sort of element of or the fabric of civil society, before even going about the political change.
I think in regards to the dawah to non-Muslims, this is dawah for Muslims is wajib anyway. It's like it's fard. And the thing is in regards to people going to these tribes and stuff like that, they are conveying the message. That's something which we should do anyway. I think the only thing I would add to that is the fact that you would have like just say you would have individual dawah, but I think the actual methodology of dawah is at a state level where it's conveyed at a state. So, but the point is, you don't stop because there's no state. You understand? Because there's still an obligation for you to be conveying to, and the thing to Muslims and non-Muslims. The thing is in regards to with Muslims now, I think a lot of the big issues right now, are to do with Aqidah, to do with their purpose in life, to, you know, the fundamental question of why we're here. Is this something which we've just inherited from our parents, or have we really thought about these questions? I think that's the sort of level that, you know, you're speaking to people. Also, at the same time, and I think you're in a really good position to do this, bro, and taking the discussion back to the education and academia, is the sort of onslaught of liberalism from an academic point of view, to do with gender equality, liberalism, modernity. But also, I want to get your thoughts on this as well. I believe that, you know, educational institutions, they educate people, but it's the society that cultures people.
Yeah.
So what you're seeing is these people who are, you know, like, for example, you're studying philosophy and all these things, but alhamdulillah, it's not affected you in the sense where you are seeing it as the truth now.
Yeah.
It's a wider society level, through social media, through these other kind of apparatus, or just through interaction, movies and stuff like this. That's where they're really indoctrinating people. That it comes from there. It doesn't come from the academia. But I think you're in a good position, I think, where a lot of Muslims, what I'm noticing, I don't know about if it's in Canada, you could probably touch on this. I think Muslims now, because maybe their primary thing is about work and stuff like this, they don't feel equipped in speaking to their children about these issues. Or when these issues occur, like when they're brought up in work or at work or whatever, they feel like they're not equipped to deal with questions such as atheism, deism, you know, liberalism and stuff like this. And I think that's why the fact that you have a really good understanding on that, personally, I believe that puts you in a position where maybe that's how you kind of like empower other Muslims. Because I think what's something that's lacking, and it goes back to your classroom example of feminism, is confidence in the deen, confidence in it as being the truth, confidence with our historical past. And I think these two things, and I think that confidence is lacking because of knowledge in these fields.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe the fact that you are going, you know, you are studying these, I think maybe there's the extra responsibility where it's not just for yourself. However, maybe it's a case where you take a more active role with Muslims who are confused and their kids are confused, and parents are worried about their kids leaving Islam, or their kids not sure about which body, you know, what their real gender is, and whether they're just stuck in a different body. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
I
Absolutely.
think these are the big challenges right now for Muslims, bro, in the West.
Yes, Farnell, absolutely. You know, this ties back to the importance of you know, like raising children, tarbiyah. You know, like having the particular aspects of not only just teaching, you know, not only just teaching, of course, and it's quite important, the daily adhkar, and then doing hifz al-Quran, and just dealing with particular limited, not necessarily limited, but general premises of the fiqh of salah, the fiqh of wudu, etc. But understanding, you know, these particular sort of discussions and questions, you know, it's very important for children to be raised in a particular Islamic environment, especially through the masjid, and not only just in the masjid, but in the household as well.
The
If,
house
for
is
example,
important, bro. The house is very important.
if they go to the masjid and then they come back to their home and you just have, for example, some music blasting, cussing, etc., you know, this is quite detrimental.
Backbiting and all sorts, man.
Backbite, etc. Exactly. You know, it's quite important to sort of have that in both the private family setting, as well as being involved in the masjid as well. And through that, you know, I sincerely believe in, as well as homeschooling as well, where basically either like you're being homeschooled by your parents, or at least sometimes some particular masjids, alhamdulillah, the one I'm in, offers homeschooling services for the secular studies as well, be it
Alhamdulillah.
mathematics,
Alhamdulillah.
even the French language as well, here in Montreal. So,
But is
alhamdulillah,
there here there's a clampdown on homeschooling? I don't know if that's the case there.
no, honestly, no, there isn't really. As honestly, for the issue of homeschooling, I feel like in the UK there's more of a, you could sort of say it's more liberal fundamentalist compared to Quebec, where basically like I think it was just really during the time of the rise of ISIS when, Quebec was clamping down upon different masajid,
Ah,
and whatnot.
right. Okay. Okay. That's quite
But
recent then,
now,
really.
yeah,
Last
yeah,
10 years?
yeah, exactly. But now it's more quiet now. The measures we do what we sort of want in terms of the homeschooling, as long as, for example, it just meets the criteria. For example, if you have to learn French, like that's pretty much the sort of
So you have to learn French.
if you want to excel in particular employments, education, yeah, you have to learn French. So, for example, me when alhamdulillah, there's two options. My mother, she came here before the it was called Loi Bill 101, where they started imposing particular French upon the education. So my mother came in the 70s, like a bit earlier, prior to, I think it was 77 or 78 when they imposed this particular law. So I was able to go to a bilingual school instead of a French school. And being exposed to a bilingual school, alhamdulillah, it was actually very good. We use most of the time English, mathematics, science is taught in English, whereas um, geography, and French in itself are taught in French. So it was quite interesting actually to have that dynamic, like have those different perspectives, being exposed to those particular things. But as well as, for example, here in the homeschooling system, like I believe it is to be followed to follow that particular model of teaching history and geography in French, and ethics. I believe in French too, and then the rest of the subjects are in English. So alhamdulillah, like I had the I would say a blessing to sort of not be under the French dominance of like not speaking, not necessarily knowing the language completely, but at least being exposed to it in a healthy way. Because I know a lot of actually Pakistanis here, like they come here, immigrants, the children are immigrants. They actually only speak Urdu and French. They don't speak
Okay, so
English.
so I was going to ask you that. So there are people who
Yeah,
either speak French or English.
yeah. There are some people who
You speak
admittedly,
French, English, and Punjabi, yeah?
I don't speak really Punjabi that much, and my Urdu
That's a
it
big
needs.
problem, bro. That's the same problem here, man. Like kids don't speak it anymore. Big problem.
Yes,
And it's
yeah,
it's it's
it
down to the
is.
parents, man. It's down to the parents.
Yeah, it is. At the end of the day, so everybody went through particular contexts. My Urdu needs refining as well, just because sometimes my parents they were in a context where I was raised with two working parents, to some degree, and when you're not exposed to Urdu that much, it
Yeah, yeah.
seems to decay. So I speak English and French fluently, but my Urdu is in need of refinery. But
Mashallah.
nevertheless, coming back to that sort of subject of, like you mentioned, for example, well, we mentioned right now raising children in the proper Islamic tarbiyah. There's also the aspect of, uh, I sincerely believe in seeking ilm, and this is an advice to myself because I'm not someone who has been consistent with this, and I should be consistent. May Allah make us all consistent in seeking
I
ilm.
mean,
Um, you know, People think that watching a lecture on YouTube, about the Sira is like, oh, mashallah, it's in. But the aspect is that I think Imam Malik, rahimahullah, he said that learn manners before, and what he was sort of establishing very intelligently is that there's a particular methodology and etiquette to seeking in, through coming to an alim, sitting down at the feet of the alim and learning the particular aspects of the deen, learning the usul of the fiqh and then the fiqh afterwards. Nowadays, because of the accessibility, people just go online. Okay, I'm going to do a crash course on fiqh. The reality is that these, of course, it's good introduction, but is it really the classical primordial sense of ilm? That's the sort of important sort of distinction we have to make. People need to seek the ilm of this deen so that they have at least the basics of, for example, aqidah, of fiqh, of even just understanding, for example, tafsir as well, to some degree. Like there's so many different aspects of it that we really need to refine ourselves. We sort of sometimes make this distinction that, I don't have time really to be an alim, or be a talib al-ilm. But alhamdulillah, I know at least in Montreal, there's quite a few, I think two or three good programs of basically ulama being in the making. Some talib ilm, you know, really just like these are people who they have 40 hours a week of work, they're paying rent, they have family, but alhamdulillah, they make efforts of
It's
just
the desire,
going.
innit, bro. It's the desire.
Yeah, exactly. So it's so important to seek there. And me, of course, I could talk about, I guess secularism, liberalism for hours, but when it comes to him, I like it. I'll be honest with you, I really do like it. And I have no one to blame but myself in that sort of regard. Because it really, ilm is not something that, it should have came to me as a child. No, it's something that is sought. It is something that is sought and continuously, consistently sought for the pleasing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then secondly, to at least be aware of one's deen, so that we do not deviate away from it.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
that's the other aspect of it. It's not just about, some people, so I remember that I was in a sort of a family function, and I met this professor, he's been studying Islamic studies, I think, for like 30 years or something. And the time of Salah came and he was refraining,
Yeah.
yeah, subhanAllah. And like it's like, imagine like if the ilm of this deen, oh sorry, if truly what he was seeking was ilm, of course hidayah from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But the thing is, if truly it was, then of course it would have an effect on his heart to at least pray the salah. But the reality is that when we're dealing with the academics, we're just dealing with a particular baggage of this sort of Western condescending attitudes towards Islam, or at least
Bro,
patronizing.
it's also
Yeah,
like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes donkeys carrying books
yeah, literally. SubhanAllah.
um, in the Quran and stuff. But the main thing is, to be honest with you, whether someone is academic or not, I think the important thing is that
Yeah,
they internalize the aqidah so that their mentality and their disposition are in tune. So what they incline towards and what they stay away from is in line with the Sharia. And I
yeah,
think that could be a guy who's sweeping the streets, or it could be some guy teaching science.
yeah,
In reality, in the sight of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the guy who's sweeping the streets has more value than the one who has achieved degrees, and awards and awards and awards. And I think what it boils down to really is, which is probably another topic for another episode, really, to be honest with you, bro, is the purpose in life. Why are we here? What is success? Why is it that you see Muslims, some parents who, when their kid is really bright, then they really push him to the academia, Western
yeah,
academia. And if he ain't that, if he's not all that, they'll say, okay, let's send him to the madrasa.
yeah,
Because to them, their view of what is success is not right. The priorities are wrong in life. So I think this is where what it boils down to, really, and it's something you mentioned a bit earlier, is you're doing this for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And I think it's one of those things where in life, how you behave can kind of reflect how you think. And you
yes,
could carry the title of a Muslim, and you could carry the title of a non-Muslim. Sometimes you have non-Muslims who are more honest, upright, and trustworthy than Muslims, right? Obviously,
mhm,
they're still kuffar, but I'm talking about from a personality point of view. So these are the sort of questions, bro. But listen, I think I want to sort of bring the podcast to a close, brother Abdul Ahad. What I want to do, though, is get your kind of final thoughts on anything you want to speak about. Maybe some of the ideas, the key concepts you want people to take away from this episode. But what I also want to do is I want to combine that with, and I know you've touched upon it as well, but combine that with the challenges that you see Muslims are facing in the sort of Western academia, especially studying the concepts, the topics such as liberalism, modernity, and so on. So I know that's a lot there, but I want to get your final thoughts and express those points that you think you want people to take away from this listening to this podcast?
I sincerely believe that, the main particular subject, that we were sort of dwelling upon was the issue of modernity and, I guess, assimilation towards that sort of, ideologies that modernity holds. And the most best thing that one should do, firstly, is to understand one's purpose, primordial purpose. That, of course, we're trying to please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and worship Him, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is worthy of this worship. It transcends all of our particular sort of, I guess, our ego or our worldly affairs. And then, secondly, one thing I would mention is that no matter what particular case you are in, never sort of let go of the deed, even if, for example, if you're having matters of doubts and whatnot, and assimilate towards these sort of ideologies that are in the hegemony right now. In terms of these particular ideologies and dealing with academia, I sincerely believe that there's two particular aspects. There's a sort of liberal tradition, and there's this sort of neo-republican tradition. I won't go too much into detail with that, but one thing is that neo-republicanism is a sort of idea of, we touched a lot upon, but we didn't really name it, is this idea of what is a good citizen. Islam is much more tolerant, to the extent where people within an Islamic model of state allows people to uphold their own personal views. Be it, they could be part of the protected people of Ahl al-Dhimma, and they are allowed to have their views and their particular aspects, whereas the secular liberal models, ironically, are less tolerant, by trying to assimilate people towards their particular views, and if not, can face consequences, be it imprisonment for refusing, for example, in the UK, their children to learn about gender ideology, by refusing people who, if they want to wear their religious attire here, they will be refused employment, a source of income in Quebec. So I sincerely believe that we have to understand these sort of cleavages. We have to understand these layers of context as Muslimin. It is not bad to study the social sciences, but we should understand what we're getting into. We're getting into not only just the content-wise, we're also getting into interpersonal connections and relations with various different kinds of people there. You're going to deal with hardcore Orientalists. You're going to deal with sort of closet liberal or feminist, modernist, individualist kind of Muslims as well, who perhaps they do practice the deen, but the reality is that they have actually adopted these ideologies. Not that we should have an inquisition upon them. Of course, people should be called out, but not so we have an inquisition, against these people. We have to understand that, this is the particular context, and we cannot just be one of those subjective ideologies. We have to understand that Islam is a transcendental, objective way of life that has provided, both from a individual and societal level, of how we should live. What is the best model of society, as well as the individual heart. So those are my final thoughts. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us all a tawfiq, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allow us to trust in Him, only in terms of all of our affairs.
Ameen. Ameen.
Yeah.
Bro, to be honest with you, in your final thoughts, you included so much that we can discuss and talk about. It has to, I think this is just like, we're going to leave this episode as a teaser. Because there was a lot to discuss, and like you're saying, in regards to the what you have, the proponents of those who promote freedoms and all this, and in reality they're the thought police. But in Islam, it's a fantastic point you made, bro, and people don't know this. Muslims don't know this. Forget non-Muslims, that in Islam, when people are living under an Islamic state and the Khilafah, the non-Muslims, the Ahl al-Dhimma, those people who will pay the jizya, who have a covenant with the state, what they think in regards to how they want to live their life, as long as it doesn't materialize in society, they can think as they want. In reality, they can do things in their home, which is really bad. But the state doesn't have that remit to go into their home, right? Because you have a private space and you have a public space. But here, I mean, I'm going to tell you something. I remember I was getting these police officers coming looking for me, right? And I kept missing them. One day in the morning, they turn up and I was about to leave for work. All right, okay, what's going on here then? Obviously, I knew it was prevent linked. So check this out. And it really, this goes to this, really illustrates your point as in, to the T, where, so this is police officers now. And they said, we want to speak to you about a Facebook post. And I was like, they said someone complain. I said, shouldn't they complain to Facebook? Surely there's crimes being committed, right? You've been harassed. You've been coming around, and you're here now spending taxpayers' money to speak about a post. And I didn't even place this post, right? It was about Shamima Begum and all that. But the point was, and I said, look, this is thought police, right? But this goes to your point, the fact that these are the people who push freedom of expression, freedom of thought, and freedom of speech. But going back to the issue of, as Muslims, why are we just trying to fit in? We should not be the ones that are on the defense. We should be on the attack from an ideological point of view, I mean, because we have the haqq. And I think, this is where we fall short. But I don't want to go into any other topics, bro, because there's loads to speak about. And I'm sure, as I have, the people listening and watching this really enjoyed having you on the episode, bro. And definitely, inshallah, this is first of many. If obviously whether you want to come back on, that's something that you can, take offline. But certainly, I'd like to get you back on at some point, inshallah. Maybe even in Ramadan, but we'll see, man. But Jazakallah khair, bro, for coming on. For everyone listening at home, I hope you benefited from this. Well, not listening at home, but everyone listening or watching, because you could even be in your car, right? I hope you also benefited from this topic as well. One thing I want to mention before going, and I could be putting you on the spot here. And you have all the right to say, not this time, bro. But I just wanted to let everyone know that Brother Abdul Ahad is also a poet. And some of his poetry, mashallah ta'ala, is really good. So I could put you on the spot and say, bro, if there's anything you've remembered, if you want to, recite some of your poetry, I'll give you the opportunity. If not, then, we could do it another time.
Barakallah fiqh. Firstly, thank you for all those, this discussion and whatnot. In regards to that, I'm more someone who I like to just post my poetry, not necessarily recite like spoken word, like the brother Kamal Salah in Talk Islam. I'm not really like that. But it's something that I prefer someone reads it from their particular point of view and not necessarily hear my tone of expression when I
like it, bro. I like it. And like I said, when I read it, I'm sure I see it differently than someone else because of what I already carry. But bro, listen, inshallah, on that one, I want to bring the podcast to a close. Once again, Jazakallah khair for joining us. And inshallah ta'ala, for everyone listening and watching, and to my special guest, Brother Abdul Ahad, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Barakallahu feek.